Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. So today I want to talk about why the psyche of the modern man is not built for collapse. So let's get to it. Don't forget to click the bell icon to be notified when new videos are posted. Enjoy the video. On the most recent video I did, many people believe that the meaning of life is the pursuit of happiness. Personally, I think that every emotion is there because it helps us survive. The only reason why we have emotions is because they provide some sort of function to our survival. So we have the emotion of sadness to communicate that we are in pain to other people around us. We have the emotions of anger as a means of defense. We have other emotions which are the consequence of our social evolution. Things like grief, disgust, embarrassment, despair, and guilt. The thing that should stand out for people here is that on the spectrum of emotion, happiness is but one sliver of this entire spectrum. Yet it's the only emotion deemed socially acceptable to express, as we'll discuss in this video. Happiness serves a function to our survival. You could argue in that it allows human bonding to occur on a deeper, more meaningful level. Happiness is an outward expression of when we are feeling physically content. Happiness helps keep us motivated in order to press on for another day. So indeed, happiness plays a role in our survival, but it's been so overblown in the modern day, such that different social media platforms like Facebook won't even allow people to dislike things because they want it to be a positive experience. And you're never going to see the negative in a person's life on social media like Instagram. It comes out periodically when people have their breakdowns and they scream out to the world for support. But by and large, people are putting all front end stuff on there and no back end. It's like when you're driving down the street, you see everybody's front yard. It's nice, it's clean, it's cut. You don't see their backyards, which could be a complete disaster for all you know. On Facebook, you don't see the back door of people's lives. You don't see the backstory. You only see the front end, the happy stuff in the magazines. You only see the happy stuff on the TV. You only see the happy stuff. 90% of the media, including social media that we're exposed to, is pointing towards you should be happy all the time, whereas we all know that in reality of a 24-hour day, a person is lucky if maybe they get an hour of that day spent with a genuine, deep smile on their face, especially if they're a highly productive person who's all about getting things done. And this is important because the overwhelming majority of emotions are not positive. Only one emotion is positive, and that really is happy. There's other synonyms like satisfied, content, relaxed, but by and large, most emotions are negative, from sadness to disdain to anger, irritation, frustration, boredom, confusion, being startled, being afraid, worried, frantic. These are all negative states of mind. So really, that tells you then that if over thousands and thousands of years we have evolved these emotions to survive in the world, why is it that 80% of the emotional spectrum is rooted in our emotions that are negative? Well, it's because we needed that in order to survive. Because in a situation where society devolved and there was no rule of law and the beast within man was unleashed, then we would go back to needing this proportion of emotions in order to survive. See, these social contracts offered up by the grid have allowed us to be able to make the pursuit of happiness 90% of the focal point of our lives. And for the most part, particularly in the Western world, life is pretty easy. And there's going to be a sharp decline and contrast to a crap hits the fan scenario, which is why it's going to catch so many people off guard were something catastrophic ever to happen, because it's going to involve such a huge downgrade in our standard of living, in which suddenly our survival skills that have been whitewashed and sanitized by the modern world are going to be required in order for us to navigate the post-collapse environment. But most people are still going to be caught up in what I call the happiness deception. And it's this idea that you need to be happy all the time. There's so many people who seem to be hell-bent on the notion that they should be happy all the time, and to a point in which people are now taking drugs in order to keep themselves in a constant state of happiness, which you're not supposed to be happy all the time. In nature, you are not supposed to be happy all the time, because that would be detrimental to your survival. The spoils of civilization have disproportionately inflated the emotion of happiness to be the focal point of man's pursuits, when in reality it's the last thing you actually need for survival. Do you think our ancestors were really concerned about how many people liked them when they were being pursued by saber-toothed tigers, when they were hunting out of desperation, when they were trying to stay warm from the elements? In fact, to all of the aforementioned, happiness is a major hindrance. Now, I'm not talking about being generally optimistic and having high hopes for the future that's paired with a good work ethic and preparedness. I'm talking about the bloated expectations that we have of people in the modern day. And this has led to a hypersensitive society that can't deal with the hard knocks of life without copious amounts of drugs, counseling, and pats on the back. Well, when the crap hits the fan, you're not going to have any of those things. Just think about if the rule of law was compromised, and here you are, some Ned Flanders, overly trusting, smiling all the time, Mr. Nice Guy. You're going to get walked over and trampled and taken advantage of and exploited fully. That is, however, what we as a collective, whether you want to call it the nanny state or what have you, expects of people nowadays. They expect people to be overly trusting, never read the fine print. Don't be overly critical of things. Don't think too hard about things. That's another thing that really irritated me in the last video. It wasn't so much that people disagreed. It's the people who come on and say, oh, you think too much, or, you shouldn't think so deeply about these things. Like, what a stupid statement. What a dumb thing to say, that you shouldn't think deeply about anything for that matter. I mean, that's the only reason why you're sitting at a computer right now, is because somebody thought really deep about how they could get that machine to work. So the idea that you should just forget about things that are complex to understand and focus on sports instead is part of the reason why I prep. So in the book The Brave New World, written by Aldous Huxley, there's a drug in that book called Soma. It's a dystopian/utopian prediction of how people are controlled with pleasure, and people are kept constantly subdued and manipulated by giving them an endless amount of stuff to keep their minds occupied and uncritical of the world around them. And if you ask me, that's the trip we're on. And everybody takes this drug called Soma, which essentially just makes you happy all the time. And of course, if you're happy all the time and you live in a society that waits on you hand and foot, when I go to Costco, I'm always amazed at just the bounty of stuff that there is to be had in the modern day, and how unappreciative a lot of people are of that fact, and how quickly it could all go away. And if we have a society which only requires of us to be happy, and it doesn't require us to feel anything else but happiness, while our capability then to experience the rest of the spectrum of emotion is going to drastically decline. And should crap ever hit the fan, we would again be required to know what it is to fear something. We would again be required to be fearful of things. See, fear is a good thing. Fear is almost taboo nowadays too. Oh, you're paranoid. is what they say, and paranoia is a bad thing. But really, fear is the first survival instinct. Fear is one of the first emotions that emerges because it's absolutely essential for your survival to be fearful of things which are out to get you. And if everybody's had their fear emotion neutered or turned off so they can become more complacent, unthinking, uncritically minded consumers of whatever the media and the anti-media have to say, then that's going to lead to some catastrophic decision making for a lot of people when they are forced to rely on those intuitions, senses, and emotions which have since gone unused. Now, people who live on the street or people who still have to kind of hustle to get by, they still have all of these instincts about them. Their instincts are still quite vital. But I think that a lot of people's natural survival instincts are dwindling. Our emotions, in many respects, are an archaic throwback to an earlier time in evolution. The future is all about cognition. The future is all about information processing in a way which is completely uninfluenced by emotional decision making, at least in a technological sense. And the system has done its best to ensure that all of these other archaic intuitions, emotions, and instincts have been replaced by mechanisms of the state. So you have things now like all of these anti-bullying campaigns. Well, whatever happened to standing up for yourself? Why is it that now you need an organization or you need some sort of government intervention in order to fight for your own rights? And this is how it is at every turn. Anybody who questions authority is considered mentally unwell, because to question authority is born from paranoia or fear about the way things are, and you shouldn't be fearful because paranoia is wrong. Also, you shouldn't be angry at anything. You shouldn't be quote-unquote triggered, and you shouldn't worry. You should just be happy. That's the whole mantra of modern civilization, is don't worry, be happy, because the government's going to take care of things. But what happens when all that red tape burns up in a catastrophic collapse and there is no longer no government apparatus to prop you up? You are going to have to fend for yourself. See, at every turn we're trying to anesthetize emotion, whether it's with anti-anxiety medication, antidepressant medication, anti-impulse disorder medication. But the general idea is to try to anesthetize any aberration in human behavior, because quite frankly it doesn't fit in the current global paradigm where you need a certain level of cooperation that cannot be bothered by these emotions. So I'm not even necessarily saying that what we've done as a society is by and large a bad thing. In fact, I think it's probably the only thing that we can do in order to keep this old rickety jalopy humming down the road until it totally breaks down, which it is destined to. But it's going to have the consequence of making us overly dependent on this system to mitigate our problems, particularly socially, which is why many people are going to get hustled when the crap hits the fan, in more ways than one, by other people and by their own minds. And when I say that, I mean when people have to face the reality of what's happening and they have to learn how to process grief, learn to process the loss of things, learn how to feel sad and not slap a label on themselves called depression and just sit there and die. People are going to have to take matters into their own hands. There won't be pills that can help you conveniently block out reality when the crap hits the fan. You know, it's a proven fact that depressed people actually see the world more realistically. Yes, depressed people see the world more realistically. So if you are trying to get rid of that depression by a pill, what you're essentially doing is blocking out a part of reality for that person. And in doing so, then the natural abilities which would have helped that person naturally get out of that situation no longer need to develop. So they stop developing. And so when a person is faced with a major life crisis like they are nowadays, without antidepressant medication, they're pretty much hopeless. The suicide rates would be through the roof were it not for modern psychiatry keeping people from killing themselves, because people do not have the coping skills that we at one time had in order to deal with grief and loss. And we need to remember also that it's from these emotions, it's from these dark places in our own minds that come some of the most inspirational stories. Arguably, creativity, or a significant part of creativity, stems from these adverse experiences that we suffer from. So to remove that from the situation entirely, we become a very mundane, basic, and increasingly aesthetically dumbed down civilization. I mean, look at the Michelangelo. Now move to the modern day where it's all about postmodernism. People aren't trying to depict the real world in art anymore. Now it's all about pure abstraction. So the postmodern view that there is no truth, that there is no universal truth, I'm kind of drifting off into other waters here, but the postmodern notion that there is no truth and that we can't see reality has come with it this form of artistic expression, which is highly abstract and not at all reflective of what we perceive and what our senses perceive. And this is in part due to the fact that modern video and modern sound recording and 3D rendering and all the rest has almost made these realistic depictions of art obsolete. But let me ask you, if the collapse were to happen today and you no longer had all of those things to generate media, don't you think that there would be a throwback to artistic realism? Because people would want portraits of themselves. If you couldn't take a picture, you would want a portrait drawn once again. So this is what I'm talking about with regards to a regression towards the natural realism, which has been deprogrammed from people by modern society because it's not conducive to modern overregulated consumer culture. So the modern world is killing our survival instincts, and by survival instincts we're talking about our emotions. And the whole irony with all of this is that when you look around, people are disproportionately unhappy still, even though we have every material thing we could possibly want. People are still unhappy, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Primarily it's due to alienation, it's due to people being psychologically dislocated from the tribe. That's one of the prevailing theories right now, is that we in the individualist Western matrix have become detached from our extended families and our clans, and thus for many people there's an unexplainable feeling of emptiness in everything that they try to do because they're trying to pursue happiness via materialism, wealth, and narcissistic pursuits, when the true thing that would make them happy is actual connection with other people, when all we see is disconnection in the modern internet age. There's going to be a lot of people who get hustled. There's going to be a lot of people getting hustled. There's going to be a lot of people who don't know how to manage feelings of grief and loss and despair because they've been taking happy pills for so long and they rely on that. And when the manufacturing systems that produce those pills are no more, people will suddenly become very depressed, possibly suicidal. In fact, in many cases, there probably is going to be a massive uptick in suicides should there ever be a prolonged grid down scenario of the 20% of people who are taking psychiatric medications right now, many of which are arguably overprescribed. The survival instincts required in a grid up scenario versus a grid down scenario are very different things. People who are living high on the pampered hog right now run the risk of making very poor decisions that are rooted in a naivete about the true nature of human beings. And as I indicated, it's very ironic that in a time of so much bounty, there is still so much unhappiness in the world. So this is why a lot of people are not emotionally prepared for collapse. When there is no self-help books, there is no psychiatrist, there is no medication to keep you quote-unquote balanced. There is no more Hollywood-esque American dream, per se, to guide you through those darkest moments. So this is why I tried to take the position of being so stoic and dry in some people's opinions, but that's one of the drawbacks of being a realist and only speaking in absolutes about things that I can know with 100% certainty and prove, is that it's not very compatible with modern society today, where everybody's pursuing an inauthentic happiness at the expense of their own survival instincts. But when the grid goes down, he who can make calculated decisions and keep his emotions in check and honor those other emotions which are not being honored today, those emotions which are less appealing to us, then they will fare much better in a situation in which the social contracts and the rule of law cease to be. They may come out the survivors on the other side. So not only are people becoming more dependent on the grid physically, but emotionally, we are highly dependent on the grid, and this for many people is going to be a fact which is overlooked. So make sure that you continue to hone your survival instincts, and remember, it's okay to be critical. It's okay to question reality. This is the essence of self-reliance, independence, and ultimately taking full responsibility for your own survival. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Canadian Prepper out.